Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we are also going to talk about Chaos Primaris Space Marines and why I've actually kind of reversed my previous thinking as to whether they are likely or not, or at least in the near future, let's put it that way. So this is based entirely off the fact that someone left a comment on my last video. Today we were talking about Primaris Calgar, possibly heralding the end of the standard Space Marine range. The fact that most likely Games Workshop will upgrade all of the Space Marine characters to Primaris status, and the fact that we now know that standard Space Marines can just be upped to Primaris kind of means why would you bother with having standard Space Marines if they can all undergo this process and they can all become bigger, better, faster, stronger, work it harder, whatever. Why would you not do that? They would obviously do that because there's no reason not to, especially with the whole Primaris cannot be corrupted by chaos and all of that nonsense. The writing seems to be pretty much on the wall, but someone made a very good comment because I highlighted the fact that, weirdly, we are getting slowly scaled up Chaos Space Marines, but we don't have any of the in-universe stuff to go along with it. So, Death Guard are bigger than they used to be. Thousand Suns are taller than standard Chaos Space Marines, or at least model-wise. And the new Black Legion stuff that we've seen from Black Fortress, they are undoubtedly the new Chaos Space Marines and that Lord bigger than your standard Chaos Space Marine model as it stands with the current kit. Now, of course, we've not got any in-universe explanation for this at all, aside from maybe kind of in a headcanon way going, well, it's the warp, it makes them a little bit bigger. We don't actually have any evidence of that. There's nothing been stated. It's not like someone has shown up in the middle of like the Dark Imperium novel or Plague War or whatever and gone, isn't it weird how all these Chaos Space Marines are slightly taller than they used to be? They're like a head bigger or something. It's odd, that, isn't it? No one's done that. It's just happening. And someone brought up on that video in a comment, does this mean that there's not going to be Primaris Chaos Space Marines? Because they thought that eventually there would be. And you know what? I thought exactly the same thing. But now I'm actually beginning to wonder whether we will see that after all. See, I think it could actually go a little bit different to that. It could be not quite that clear cut, let's put it that way. So, the Death Guard models are slightly bigger than the Chaos Space Marine models that you can currently buy in a tactical squad equivalent. Thousand Suns models are taller than you buy in that box, the tactical squad equivalent. The new Black Legion stuff from Black Fortress is undoubtedly bigger. They are taller, the scaling is more accurate to what it should be. They are actually the right size, pretty much, for what they should be as Space Marines. And that was always the issue. The scale was completely off for Space Marines. They're supposed to be way taller than standard human, and yet they were the same height as Imperial Guard and everything else, which didn't make much sense, but that's just the way things shook out over the years. Now, previously, I was pretty much of the opinion that we would just end up seeing Primaris Chaos Space Marines. That at some point, the same range replacement would happen. Probably a little bit further down the line, but that, Fabulous Bill or whoever would discover the secrets of the Primaris and just reverse engineer it and bam, Chaos Primaris Marines. Easy. Sorted. Or there'd be some sort of hilarious incident where Call, it turns out, is full of shit and they're not immune to chaos after all. I mean, they're not going to be immune to chaos because you cannot break the universe to that extent. You cannot suddenly make half of the main narrative of Warhammer 40,000 immune to the influence of the other half. That's stupid. Honestly, that is a plot point that I'm assuming was only introduced so that it can be used to say, oh god, we were wrong later on. If it remains that Primaris Marines are essentially immune to the influence of chaos, then that is, to me, that is a what the hell were you thinking kind of moment, because you can't just... The conflict between Chaos and the Imperium is the story of Warhammer 40,000. You cannot just go, oh, now the Imperium doesn't have a problem with that when it comes to their best troops. No, you can't do that. That breaks the setting completely because it cuts off all the reinforcements in terms of Marines falling to Chaos for Chaos Space Marines. Dumping like an extra God knows how many Primaris Marines into the fray and making it so that instead of there being a fairly steady supply of replacements for Chaos Space Marines, cutting that off whilst making Space Marines way stronger and more numerous than before, just unbalances the conflict to the point where you need some really, really interesting plot developments to even maintain that balance. I mean, we do have the Great Rift. We've got that massive, divider that's been thrown down the middle of the Imperium, which obviously is not great. It means half the Imperium Nihilus is in a pretty bad way. But is that really enough to counter a sudden influx of loyal Space Marines who cannot be corrupted by chaos in any way? Not really. Not in my mind, anyway. Especially since they can demonstrably get across that rift. Not easily, but it is possible. I mean, Guilliman's been gallivanting all over the shop like nobody's business, so it's obviously made out to be a massive deal, but it doesn't seem to really be having that much of a hampering factor on where Guilliman and his, new fancy shiny boys can and cannot go. But the thing of Chaos Space Marines becoming Primaris is it's like a weird thing where it could only happen through the intervention of someone like Fabius Bile, or some other named character that would be dropped as almost like a Chaos Call equivalent. It would have to be, I think. Let's face it, because there's not a huge number of people on the Chaos side who would have the experience required to suddenly make that leap. You could maybe come up with some sort of amazing Dark Mechanicus tech priest or Dark Magos or something that could perhaps do something similar, but when you've got someone like Bile just lying around who has all the expertise required to clone and genetically enhance and has done so much work on the Emperor's Children, created the Cacophony, for instance, how much more do you need in terms of expertise to give Chaos Space Marines the old Primaris boost? I thought that was what was going to happen, to be honest. I was really expecting that Chaos Space Marines would end up with a way to convert to Primaris. We would end up with a rough equivalence across the ranges. But I didn't like that idea, because Chaos needs to have its own. It needs to have its own flavour. It needs to have its own take. That's why I really want to see a replacement for the Chaos Space Marine box, because at the moment they look like normal Marines with a bit of extra stuff stuck on. They don't have their own personality. It's just, there's a few more spikes and have the occasional plume. I don't really like that. They're too similar at a glance. Now, the stuff that we saw from Black Fortress, yes, they are still similar, and they do need to still be similar. They are Space Marines after all, but they have more personality of their own. They look like they were made to look different. I don't know how else to put it, but they fulfill more to me what I would expect Chaos Space Marines to look like. They are a nice midway point between a standard Space Marine and the Dark Vengeance stuff that we had, which was way at the other end of the scale as to being kind of quite busy, definitely a lot more chaosy and a lot more interesting in terms of how they looked and very different. But Black Legion stuff from Black Fortress is a nice kind of mix of the two. Having got those sculpts, this is where I'm just starting to doubt whether we will see Chaos Primaris after all, or at least on a grand scale. I'm now wondering whether we won't see Chaos Primaris as maybe not even a troops choice or whatever. It might be that they are more of an elite force than they are for Space Marines. The way it's being approached with Space Marines, they are clearly the replacements for Space Marines. Primaris is going to be what takes over from Space Marines. They will be the bread and butter, the troops, the everything. They are their replacement. For Chaos Space Marines, we already have the new Death Guard stuff. We have the Thousand Suns stuff. Now we have the new kind of tactical squad equivalent. We've seen some of that stuff from Black Fortress. They're not Primaris. They're bigger than the normal Chaos Space Marines. They're bigger than normal Space Marines. They're clearly being scaled up. They're being brought up to be the correct sort of size for what they should be. But they're definitely not Primaris. Now, the story of Primaris Chaos Space Marines is still open. There's still things that can be done, and I have no doubt that we will see some sort of genetic trickery or messing around from Bile or whoever else. But my original thought was that Space Marine range will be replaced, Chaos will basically get the same thing, and that will slowly roll over as well. I now find myself doubting that. I'm now thinking, actually, what we're going to see for Chaos is just the scaling up. We won't get the in-universe explanation. The models will just be bigger. They will start to get, as we've seen, they will become closer to the correct scale for what they should be. And if we do have a Primaris Chaos Space Marine squad, it won't just be like Intercessors or Hellblasters. It won't just be as a replacement for whatever Chaos Space Marine equivalent there is at the time. It will be an actual genuine supplement, and that it might be something in the form of like an Elite's Choice or something like that, whereby perhaps Bile does have the ability to in some way replicate the Primaris side of things, but not on a grand scale. Not for the masses, but for the few. See, the way Games Workshop have introduced it for the Space Marines is that it is a mass production thing. There are fucking hundreds of thousands of these guys running around. Chaos obviously does not have the same capability, and I think it's right that they don't have the same capability. There are like obviously big stocks and I was going to say warehouses, but you know what I mean. There are a lot of Primaris kind of hanging about. Chaos might be able to get their hands on it and they might be able to do something with it, but it will never be to the same scale, it will never be the same size, and it will never be able to replace falling Chaos Space Marines the way that Primaris can replace normal Space Marines. I think Games Workshop are actually going to be splitting the ranges to the point where it makes, I say it makes more sense, but they're going to become more unique because we're going to have Primaris as being the backbone of the Space Marine army. We're going to have, you know, the Space Marines will be slowly phased out. Primaris will take over. They will be like the face of the Imperium. Chaos won't get everything that they get. They will get their own stuff that makes them roughly, I say roughly as strong. I don't think it'll even be that equivalent. I think there will be like the option to take some sort of Primaris-esque Chaos Space Marine, but it won't be anywhere near the same scale, which I think is exactly how it should be. And it's a complete reversal of what I thought before. The main thing that has spurred this on is the fact that we have those new sculpts from Black Legion, where if those are the things that we're getting in a new Chaos Space Marine box, then it doesn't make any sense to make those, release them, and then in like 6 months' time or whatever, go, oh, by the way, here's a bunch of Primaris replacements for all this stuff. I think it's going to be more, the two factions are going to be more distinct than that. They're going to be more separated than that. And that is unquestionably, to me, a genuinely good thing. The thing that I've started to dislike the most about Chaos are the bits that are left over from like the Space Marine stuff. The fact that we've got like crazy cool stuff like the Forge Fiend and the Hell Brute and the Helldrake and the Mauler Fiend, and you've got things like Obliterators and Mutilators and Chaos Spawn, and you've got Defilers and Soul Grinders, and then you've got a Vindicator and a Land Raider and a Predator that are just exactly the same as the Space Marine ones, but with spikes on. The faction as a whole, I think, should shift further away from that. It should be more distinct than that, and if we are not getting Chaos Primaris, that is a good way to do it, because Chaos can still scale up, it can still be the right size for what they should be, but it doesn't have to be exactly what Space Marines have, and it will retain that individuality, and we can still have things like the occasional kind of elite troop of Primaris-ified Chaos Space Marines as created by Fabius Bile or whoever else Games Workshop throws out to do a bit of genetic meddling. It's a complete reversal from what I thought before, and a lot of it is based on the stuff that we've seen recently. You know, Blackstone Fortress is... I kept saying Black Fortress all the way through, didn't I? Blackstone Fortress, you get it. That has really kind of pushed me towards thinking that we're not going to see it in a weird way. But I hope that all makes sense. So yeah, let me know what you think of all that in the comments down below. Do you think we will see Chaos Primaris? Do you think we won't see Chaos Primaris after all? Let me know what you think. In the meantime, feel free to click Patreon, subscribe, video, all of that stuff. Click it if you like, don't if you don't want to. And I'm going to go away and count how many times I said Black Fortress instead of Blackstone Fortress, because I bet it was a lot, and I bet it's going to really get on your nerves. I'll see you for the next one. Toodaloo.